Hello and welcome to the Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, a deadly catalogue of mounting insecurity in northern Nigeria. Dozens of soldiers and civilians killed in Borno and Yobe states in the northeast. Kidnapped university students found dead in Kaduna State in the northwest, and Boko Haram reportedly overrunning a village in Niger State and hoisting their flag there, just 2 kilometres away from the capital Abuja, according to the state governor. Not to mention offensives by armed men in several other states. With the authorities struggling to cope with the blizzard of attacks, we ask, is it time to admit failure and seek greater assistance from the international community? We'll speak to the Brigadier General, who until recently was the spokesman of the Nigerian army. And later, political violence in the capital of Somalia, Mogadishu. Rival forces occupying different parts of the city, one of the worst crises in Somalia for many years, a country in which the outside world has spent a fortune helping it to rebuild itself. How has it once again degenerated to this point? We'll break down the breakdown in security in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, coming up. Now let's focus on the deteriorating security situation in Nigeria in general and northern Nigeria in particular, where there have been more attacks in the last few days. In one, militants stormed a military base in Borno State in the northeast. Security sources initially talked of at least 30 dead soldiers. The Nigerian military later said an officer and 6 soldiers were killed. Civilians were also targeted in the neighboring state of Yobe, where the army claims to have killed 21 militants. A primary school teacher was reportedly beheaded in that attack. Amid this sort of continuing violence in Nigeria, many are asking how to prevent further bloodshed.
In Nigeria is as a result of injustice. Injustice and inequality. Where there is no equity and justice, there will be no peace. And where there is no law and order, there will be no justice. Just last week, 11 soldiers, including an officer, was killed, not by herdsmen, but because of the communal clash, and these gallant soldiers went there to settle them. And up to now, nothing happened. 11 soldiers. All we hear is that they will become, the government will come after them, we will bring them to justice, and that is it. Let us not deceive ourselves. And this deception is catching up with everybody.
That's Senator Ali Ndume there, who comes from Borno State in the northeast. Well, for more on the growing insecurity in northern Nigeria and what can be done about it, the former spokesman of the Nigerian army, Brigadier General Sani Usman, joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed. An absolute delight to see you, even though it's in these very sad circumstances. Nevertheless, we're very honored to have you here. Let's start with the insurgency. There's so much to talk about, but let's begin with the insurgency and try to get your sense of what is behind this increase in violence. Is it Boko Haram, ISWAP, and Saru? Do we know who is instigating these attacks? Because they are all operating in the northeast, aren't they? And now expanding beyond that region.
Well, first and foremost, it's a great honor and pleasure to have me on your program. Going back to the problem at hand, every right-thinking Nigerian, in fact, all humanity are concerned about the current wave of security challenges in the country, be it in the northeast, southeast, south-south, northwest, or what have you. Going to the question you asked about making sense out of it, we have to look at it in isolation. Take, for instance, each of the incidences, we look at it as it is. If we are going to take the issue of Gaidan, for instance, we have to also look at the strategic importance of getting down to the insurgents, you know, first and foremost.
That's in Yobe State.
Yobe State.
Yes.
Now, it is strategic in the sense that it forms a kind of a smuggling route for them. And this is where they get their supplies through smuggle items or goods and what have you. And they also interact with the people. So recognizing the strategic importance of that area will tell you that they will do everything they can to ensure that you know, they open that main supply routes for themselves.
Yeah, but you would think that the Nigerian government would also do all that it can to make sure that they don't have access to that area.
Well, I'm coming to that.
Okay.
And, you know, recognizing the importance of that area to the insurgents means that we have to take decisive action to continuously deny them, if possible to even eliminate them so that they will not even have access to it. And I believe the security forces are doing the best they could to ensure that that is being done.
Yeah,
and
but the best isn't good enough, is
well,
that's the
people,
problem.
you will think that it is not good enough, but you know, he who wears the shoes knows where it pinches, and I know that they have been doing the best they could. Not quite a long, I have been talking with other people, you know, that there is a kind of need for more synergy of effort, and I believe that will need it in the board, and the more we have that, the better. And I think the state governor is reaching to the military hierarchy, and of course the federal government. I can tell you in no distant time that issue will be decisively dealt with.
Well,
now,
we've
coming
heard
back
it all
to
before. I'm sorry, Brigadier General. With all due respect to your analysis, which is very valuable, because I mean the things you're saying are very, very important. But the honest truth is that, speaking as someone in this country and speaking perhaps on behalf of many, many Nigerians, they've heard it all before. I mean, all these groups have been competing against each other, these groups that I mentioned, and battling to see which one can inflict the most damage, and doing rather well at inflicting that damage. And of course, the people of the Northeast are the worse for it, because these people are attacking both soft targets and military bases. So they attack the soft target, which is made up of just ordinary people, and then they attack the military bases, which are supposed to protect the ordinary people. So the people of the Northeast are caught in between.
it is not just the people of the north. Every other.
No, I know,
Nigerian,
but we're talking. We're
really,
going to get to all the rest.
We are talking about
we're talking specifically about
they feel
the
it more, but
right.
every other Nigerian, a right-thinking Nigerian, is concerned because lives have been lost,
Absolutely.
properties have been destroyed. So it calls for concern. So, like I was saying earlier on, you know, the issue now is to deny them the freedom of action, freedom of movement, so that they cannot be able to do that. And it's a kind of byproduct of other concerted effort. Remember, the military has gone further to take on the Timbuktu Triangle and what have you. They are in the processes of consolidating, and these guys are panning out. Therefore, there is need for blocking forces. And apart from that, people should also be more forthcoming with information, because sometimes they mingle with the society, hardly knowing their motives. Not till when it happens, then you realize that this is because the bulk of the people that you've been talking with, there is this issue of lack of timely, accurate information.
Basically, you have an intelligence deficit.
Exactly, and I'm coming to that.
Right.
You see, the problem is that these people that provide the information and the intelligence, they are not coming from the moon. The issue of war economy is real, in the sense that the military or the security forces make use of the available intelligence provided by people. But at the same time, some of these people also work for the other side.
Absolutely.
And basically that is the issue. And that is more reason why we should get our acts together to make sure that we are dealing with the right people.
How long is it going to take to get that act together? Because we've been here, I mean, you've been the Army spokesman. We have spoken before in the past, and I'm not holding you personally responsible for what is going on in the Army, but you're the person who was the mouthpiece of the Army. And, you know, you're saying this is what we should be doing. We've been hearing that for the last decade. Why isn't it being done? That's the question.
I
Nigerians
don't think
want
it is
to know.
within the last decade. You see, you have to understand the fluid and dynamic nature of this kind of, counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism.
There's an ebb and a flow.
Exactly. So every situation brings a new wave of challenge that you have to rise up to the occasion and know so that you'll be on top of the game.
Right.
So it is not the same one solution that fits all over time. So basically that is what I want you to understand.
Sure.
Now going back to the issue of, let's even look at Minok again. The same issue of intelligence. Sometimes, and I could remember before I was inducted into the theater of operations, there was a time I was at the Air Force Base. Basically that time, because it was only at the Air Force Base that aircraft operates. I saw someone that was arrested, and they were about taking him to, a detention facility, and I was worried. I said, why? They said, look, this guy's job was just to report to somewhere, somehow, anytime an aircraft lands or anytime an aircraft takes off. And as of that time, I'm talking about 6 or 7 years ago, barely 30 minutes to his arrest, somebody credited airtime worth 10,000 naira on his mobile phone. So just to tell you the extent to which people could go. And I could remember again, when I was serving in one division way back 2012, trying to prevent Boko Haram infiltrating the northwest that time, there was a particular physically challenged person that people take for granted, not knowing that he was a logistics officer.
Yes.
By the time he was arrested, there were millions of naira in his account.
That's
so
that's a very interesting point.
Yeah, it is.
And
so what I'm trying to tell you
yeah.
is that we have to understand the fact that the issue of war economy is very real.
Okay,
I'm going to ask everybody that is interested in peace and tranquility of this country. People are benefiting for some reason.
We must take a break, but we'll come back and you can finish that thought. I've got to take a break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the continuing violence in northern Nigeria and how to prevent further bloodshed. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now let's continue our analysis of the growing problem of insecurity in Nigeria with my guest today, the former Nigerian Army spokesman, Brigadier General Sani Usman. Beyond the insurgency that's plagued the northeast for more than a decade and now seems to be making inroads into the northwest, there's also the vexing question of banditry in the region, where people are regularly kidnapped for money. In the latest incident, 2 more university students abducted, along with 17 others and 3 non-academic staff from the privately owned Greenfield University in the Chikun area of Kaduna State, have been found dead. 3 students had already been killed by kidnappers on Friday. Unlike some neighboring states, the Kaduna State government has a policy of not negotiating with abductors or paying a ransom. Governor Nasir El-Rufai instead wants kidnappers arrested and prosecuted. Mass kidnappings of students for ransom payments have been on the increase in Nigeria, with authorities struggling to cope with very poor security infrastructure. And the former spokesman of the Nigerian Army, Brigadier General Usman, is still with me in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. And you were finishing a thought. I thought it was very interesting what you were saying. You were talking about the fact that you come across these people and you don't know who they are, and they could well be people working on the opposite side of the fence.
That's correct. And I believe the problem still persists till this moment, and to a large extent, it further aggravated the security challenges we are having, not just in the northeast, but even in the northwest, because the menace of informants, in fact, is so devastating, and they form the pivot around which the criminality, revolves, in the sense that I doubt if anybody would just wake up and say he's going to kidnap X, Y, Z, and take an opportunity target. Well, it could be possible, but it's a painstaking effort that require intelligence, reconnaissance, in the sense that you have to chase your victims based on the information available to you. then of course somebody has to move in, somebody has to do the abduction, somebody has to do the movement and safekeeping and what have you. Then start negotiating with ransom, for ransom and what have you. And of course payment.
But why do those people seem to have better intelligence than the
That is where the problem lies. That is where the problem lies. You know, we tend not to have coordinated, holistic approach to the whole problems. If, for instance, now every Nigerian is carried on board, that is given sense of responsibility, it is not just enough for people in position of authority to enjoy the effect of the office without taking the responsibility. And part of the responsibility is carrying other people along, so that everybody will understand that he or she is equal partner in the project called Nigeria, because your action or inaction, whether in governance or not, has corresponding influence over certain things.
That's a very good point.
Yes. Now we start with the government. Now, to what extent have we improved in the governance in this country? To what extent the three tiers of government are working? Basically, in Nigeria, there are only two that are working. The local government system is not working, where bulk of the security challenges start from.
Absolutely.
So these are some of the reasons, because if the local government system is working, the local government security committee will be working, and there will be interface, because every part of this region of forest belongs to a particular local government.
You have a very good point there. Now, you started talking about the Northwest, so let's turn to the Northwest, because that part of Nigeria, as you pointed out, is facing primarily the problem of banditry, although there's now talk of Boko Haram hoisting flags and so on. I'll come to that in a moment, but it is facing the problem of banditry. The bandits are primarily focused on the type of violence that involves kidnapping and extortion. Is that right?
Well, to some extent. But if you agree with that assertion, how do you account for the killing, pillaging of villages, displacement and raping of women?
Well, they're criminals.
So you see, so it is not that simplistic. Therefore, there is a combination of criminality, because people tend to have excuses for this act of criminal activities. Well, some cannot be justified. Because up to now, I find it very difficult for anybody to convince me why somebody will go to a particular community, destroy the community, abduct their women and children, including elderly, and rape the women and kill some of them.
Well, I mean,
so what do you intend to achieve?
Well, I mean, the idea is to frighten people. I mean, that's the whole point of being either a criminal or a terrorist. I mean, you terrorize the people so that you frighten them to the point where they do what you want them to do. I mean, that's the same thing that happened with Islamic State in Syria, public executions, all that sort of thing. That's what happens with, organized crime, in any part of the world, and with terrorism. They set out to terrorize the people. So a multi-layered problem of insecurity in the north, both criminal elements who are in it for the money and groups who have a political ideology. And that's the problem in northern Nigeria. It's being attacked from both sides. Does the government need different tactics to deal with these groups, these two differing groups?
Well, I don't think it is issue of government tax, use changing taxes or what have you. Just like I earlier mentioned, some of this, all of the security challenges are evolving, they are dynamic. I think the issue is being responsive to this dynamism of the security challenges as they evolve. And maybe we should also think of whether the measures being taken so far, whether they are good enough or they are sufficient. I will tell you that we still have room for improvement. Take, for instance, when you are fighting insurgency, it is not just the issue of kinetic aspect of it. There should be some, measurement of non-kinetic. So bringing it in a simplistic term, the use of both carrot and stick. I mean, so it is not just the insurgency, but also in the banditry or the abductions that are taking place. You look at some of the problems. Take, for instance, the initial banditry and abduction that started in some parts of Zamfara State, for instance, in Ansado General area. It has to do with an equal distribution of, resources.
Right.
It is not unequal in the sense that it starts more or less like hardest farmers, conflicts, but then there are retributions, and to the extent now we have proliferations of small and medium arms, which aggravated the situation. And of course we have had instances vigilantes also take a law into their hands, but that is just by the way. Now these issues have been overtaken by time and event, that the conflict resolution mechanism in this country are gradually paving way for escalation of the conflict itself. Therefore, when you are talking about solution to the problem, you have to think along that line. Then, of course, there are issues of social welfare for the people. Some of this, I told you about the issue of informants. Some of them are even doing so ignorantly. For instance, now, somebody who has not had the benefit of getting 10,000 naira per month, or in quite a long time, suddenly somebody came and gave him 30,000. So certainly he would lack the moral courage to even ask the person why he's getting the money, provided that the money is coming steadily. And the person that is paying for that has an ulterior motive, getting information, doing whatever he wants to do. And it will even surprise you to know, bulk of these kidnappers that were arrested, they put soldiers basically in an incidence of kidnapping, or let's say where a ransom of 2 million has been paid. The average kidnapper is being paid 10,000 naira. So what happened to, 1.9?
That's a very interesting question. And let me ask you to hold your thoughts. We'll come back to you in a moment. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the continuing violence in northern Nigeria and how to prevent further bloodshed. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, my guest today is the former Nigerian Army spokesman, Brigadier General Sani Usman, and he's helping us to analyze the deadly catalogue of mounting insecurity in northern Nigeria. Dozens of soldiers and civilians killed in Borno and Yobe states in the northeast, kidnapped university students found dead in Kaduna State in the northwest, and Boko Haram reportedly overrunning villages in Niger State and hoisting their flag there, just 2 kilometres away from the capital Abuja, according to the state governor. Not to mention offensives by armed men in several other states. With the authorities struggling to cope with this blizzard of attacks, we ask, is it time to admit failure and seek greater assistance from the international community?
The situation is critical and it's terrible. Last night we had over 3,000 people here from communities that have been displaced by bandits and Boko Haram elements around Munya and Shiro local governments. However, some of them have started going back to their various homes, and there are some other communities that we think are safe, they can go back. But the vast majority of them will have to remain here because their towns have been taken over by bandits and Boko Haram elements. Their wives have been seized from them. Their wives have been forcefully attached to Boko Haram members elements. In fact, I just heard they've already placed their flag in Kauri, so which means they've taken over the territory. And this is what I've been engaging the federal government with. And unfortunately, it has now gotten to this stage that if care is not taken, nobody, not even Abuja, is safe. We have been saying this for long. We've been saying this, and all efforts have been in vain.
And the former spokesman of the Nigerian Army, Brigadier General Sani Usman, is still with me in the studio. And you made a very interesting points there. You were saying that the village where these Boko Haram people are said to have hoisted their flag in Niger State is 2 kilometers from Mina, which is the capital of Niger State, rather than 2 kilometers from Abuja, which is what everybody has been reporting.
No, I don't think it is 2 kilometers away from Abuja, because if you look at Abuja, let's assume that where your studio is, just radius 2 kilometers within the city center of Abuja.
Very, very close indeed, wouldn't it?
So I think, I am not too sure about the distance, but I think it's closer to Mina, because if you look at the fact that about 3,000 people have moved into Mina city as IDP, so automatically the distance is closer to Mina than it is closer.
I think that
with
makes
Abuja,
sense.
because the closest local government with the FCT here, I think it's Suleja local government.
And I think that probably it was a slip of the tongue by the governor, and everybody's been quoting him exactly as he said it. Nevertheless, the point is that Boko Haram, according to the governor, have overrun a local government in Niger State and have hoisted their flag there. How worried should we be? Because we're no longer talking about the northeast, are we? We're talking about the northwest as well.
Everybody should be worried, because if we are thinking of banditry and kidnapping, now we have the menace of Boko Haram. If you could remember way back, 7 or 8 years ago, the menace of Boko Haram, that you cannot even afford to go to market without looking back and coming out of your house without saying prayer, not knowing whether you will come back. Because even in the Federal Capital Territory itself, all the symbols of security, civilization, and authority were desecrated. Take, for instance, a military barracks was bombed. The United Nations building was bombed. The whole police headquarters was
this
also
day newspapers
exactly
was bombed.
And the voice of the people, the newspaper, I mean the media houses were equally bombed. And it is not just that, the public space. Look at the Yanya bombing, and look at the Madala church bombing. So definitely with that at the back of your mind, definitely every person, every right-thinking person has to be worried. More so, it's something that, you know, that is least expected. But if you look at it with benefit of hindsight, it's not surprising, because we have variants of Boko Haram terrorists. Remember the Ansarus that were prevalent in the north-central part of the country. We have had instances in Kogi State, we have had instances in Nasarawa State, and now in Niger State. And of course there was semblance of violent religious extremism in Niger State. So it's not surprising when you look at it from that perspective that that thing is happening. But it is equally worrisome, given, you know, the devastation the Boko Haram terrorists or their own agenda, you know, that they come to hoist on the Nigerian society. So people should be worried, and every measure should be taken to make sure that this problem is nipped in the bud. More so now, they are just within Shiroro local government, I think a particular village or so. So let there be, you know, holistic approach, mobilization, so that these people are dislodged.
But the fact is that they are actually there. That's what's very worrying. And you talked about nipping things in the bud. Your commander-in-chief, President Buhari, came to power in 2015 on a promise to address insecurity. Are you among the many Nigerians who feel disappointed and let down by his government's failure to tackle all these armed groups that seem to be unleashing more violence with each passing day?
I think it's not using the word disappointment. Every right-thinking Nigerian is worried about security challenges. So the issue of Boko Haram, I mean, blame game should not even arise in the first place.
Well, I mean, of course it has to arise. He's the person who's I mean, you run for office on a promise that you're going to do things. People vote for you so that you can secure the country. If you fail to secure the country, we're not talking about a blame game. We're talking about you failing in your responsibility. That's what it is.
Every Nigerian has a right to his own, you know, opinion about and not just opinion about expectation on governance.
Don't you expect the president to take charge of security in this country?
It is not just the issue of the president, it is the issue of the government.
Of course.
So it's a whole gamut of people that have been voted into power to do certain things. But then if you look at the prevailing circumstances, where they were coming from, and what effort they have put in place, you have to also at the same time gauge that before coming out with a yes or no answer. But the long and short of it is that there is still room for improvement, not just in terms of security, but in terms of welfare of the people.
I think that's putting it mildly. Now, you've been in the army, Brigadier General. You've been the army spokesman. You've been privy to the fight against insecurity from a front seat position. What has gone wrong? I mean, why is it impossible for the government to secure this country and to rid Nigeria of this scourge?
Well, I don't speak for the government, all right? And I know when I was in the army, I know the effort that has been done. And I know even now, so much is being done to ensure that we reach the end state of securing Nigeria, at least to reduce the level of security challenges and criminality to the barest acceptable standard. But then at the same time, you have to look at it that when you are doing so, there are things that you have to take into consideration. The level of economy, the level of awareness, the level of so many things that need to be done.
Right.
Because security in itself doesn't come cheap. And over time, to what extent, how much have you invested in the security? Take, for instance, between 1999 to date, to what extent have you invested in the police in terms of boosting the number, recruitment, enlistment of the officer cadre, and training? What level of remuneration and what is the welfare? And you know, in modern day policing, and I can tell you, it is the neglect of the policing system that brought about the security challenges we're having in this country. And I dare say, there is no country that survives without an effective policing system. There are countries without armed forces, but there is no country without police. So and to what extent have you, invest in that?
Right. So do you think the solution to the insecurity in this country is military, political, or economic? Most people think it's economic because they say that prosperous people don't become insurgents or bandits or terrorists, do they? I mean, you don't expect somebody who's earning a good salary and all that to go and become a terrorist. But you have much more experience than we do.
Well, I think
what is your assessment?
I'm not preempting you. If you mean that way, then how do you account for Mutalab, the underwear bomber? If you are talking about prosperity.
Yeah, there is of course an ideological side.
So yes. basically it's a combination of so many things. And that is why I kept on talking about holistic approach. Because there is no way you can go into kinetic without going into the non-kinetic aspect of it. You have to ensure that people have work to do, so that the temptation to be lured into crime will not be there. At least, they said an idle mind is the devil's workshop. Quite right. But that notwithstanding again, at the same time, you have to put in measures that will even make crime something that is not paying. People take it for granted that they do things and nobody checks them.
Right, but these are things that ought to be done,
exactly,
and are not being done.
So that is issue number 2. And again, number 3, we look at even the changing nature of the world itself. Some years back, the space is now opened. The civic space, the liberty and all the rest of the things. So people are bent up emotion and anger are now, are now coming out. But now you are operating a democratic system. What provisions have you made to make the citizen understand that there are recourse to, having justice without taking out
So there's a need for good governance, basically.
Exactly,
That's an essential
and improving
part of
the institutions so that an average person will have a sense of belonging that might is not always right.
Right, but from a military point of view, is it time to admit failure and seek assistance from the international community rather than keep sacrificing the lives of Nigerians? Because this has been going on, and we've been told stories every single time.
I don't think so. Even the most advanced countries that take, for instance, to what extent has U.S. Succeeded in dealing with the insurgency and the terrorism problem in Afghanistan?
Yeah, but that's a different country.
What I believe is that we have all it takes to deal with our security challenges, and all we need to do is to put our acts together. We have to have a kind of holistic approach. We have to have greater sense of belonging. Yes, the government has to show leadership, but we have to also involve every gamut of the Nigerian society so that we have a common front. These distractions or politicization of security issues should not be, because we have a common destiny. And injustice to one, they say, is injustice to all. The same thing with this issue of security challenges. And I dare say, if, for instance, any state is not safe and secure in Nigeria, it's as well as the other 35 states are not safe and secure.
I agree. Okay. So, I want to thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry to take the words away from you there, but we've got to go. The former spokesman of the Nigerian Army, Brigadier General Sani Usman, thank you ever so much. Very, very interesting talking with you. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including political violence in Mogadishu, with rival forces occupying different parts of the city, one of the worst crises in Somalia for many years. Stay with us.